Yo, what's going on, guys? It's Aaron from ChewOnThat Apologetics, and I'm back with another video. And today, what I'm going to be discussing is the fact that Abraham actually knew that God wasn't going to make him sacrifice Isaac, and on top of that, it's actually a prophecy about Jesus, right? So, let's get into that. Now, actually, shout out to Sam Shimon, because I got this argument, well, not really argument, but I did actually find this out through him, and when I actually went and looked at the verses myself, it actually made a lot of sense. So, yeah, make sure you guys are paying attention, no distractions or anything like that. And also, I do want to say that whatever color you want my LED lights to be in future videos, y'all can just comment that, and if I heart your comment, that means that that's the color that it will be here. I'll go ahead and show you the remote so you know what colors you can choose from. So, yeah, just whatever color that you want it to be. There's blue, green, and red, pretty basic. So yeah, just you can comment whatever one you want to pick. But enough of that. Let's get into the verses. Okay, so when we go to Genesis 17:19. We see, and God said, Nay, but Sarah thy wife shall bear thee a son, and thou shalt call his name Isaac, and I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant for his seed after him. Okay, so we can establish from Genesis 17:19 that God is telling Sarah and Abraham that he is going to bear a son who they're going to call Isaac, and it's going to be an everlasting covenant for his seed after him, right? So he's going to have children. He's going to have seed after him, right? So let's now go to the next verse. Genesis 22:2. Now this is actually the chapter where this whole sacrifice situation happens, right? The second verse. And he said, Take now thy son, thine only son, whom thou lovest, even Isaac, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains which I will tell thee of. Now, what does Abraham already know 5 chapters ago? Abraham knows that God is going to make an everlasting covenant for the seed after Isaac, right? He already knows this. And now God is telling him to sacrifice his son, right? Now, if we go to verse 5, let's see what he says to his servants. And Abraham said unto his young men, Abide ye here with the donkey, and I and the lad will go yonder, and we will worship and come again to you. Wait, so Abraham is saying that he will go with the lad, Isaac. They will go yonder to the mountain. We will worship and come again to you. So Abraham already knows that he's going to come back with Isaac, right? He already knows that he's going to come back with Isaac. That's pretty interesting. Now, let's go to Hebrews to see what they have to say. Let's see what the authors of Hebrews had to say about this situation. Hebrews 11:17-19. Y'all be paying attention. Y'all need to remember these. By faith, Abraham, being tried, offered up Isaac. Yeah, he that had gladly received the promise was offering up his only begotten son, even he to whom it was said, In Isaac shall thy seed be called, accounting that God is able to raise up even from the dead, from whence he did also in a figure receive him back. So, what is this saying? This is saying that Abraham knew God's promise, right? He understood his promise that my son will be an everlasting covenant for the seed after him. So Isaac will have children. And this is saying that even Abraham had enough faith that he knew even if God did make me sacrifice my son, he 100% can just raise him back from the dead and I will receive him back anyway, right? So Abraham wasn't going into this as I'm going to sacrifice my son and that's going to be the end, no more son. He understood God made me a promise. I understand God's character enough that he's not going to lie or go back on his words, right? So we can see from these verses that God makes a promise that Isaac will become a great nation, right? Abraham is told to sacrifice his son. The 3 verses later, he tells his servants that he's going to come back with his son, and then Hebrews tells us that Abraham actually knew, or at least had faith, that he would still come back with his son, even if it meant that God was able to raise him from the dead. So, yeah, those are pretty clear to me that Abraham knew that God wasn't going to make him sacrifice Isaac. So you can actually see from these verses that Abraham knew God wasn't actually going to make him sacrifice his son. But let's get into something even deeper that I bet you had no clue about. Let's see how this actually prophesies Jesus. Okay, let's read Genesis 22, verses 7 to 8. And Isaac spake unto Abraham his father, and said, My father. And he said, Here I am, my son. And he said, Behold the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering? And Abraham said, God will provide himself the lamb for a burnt offering, my son. So they went, both of them together. Okay, so Abraham explicitly says, yeah, God is going to be providing the lamb, right? Now let's look. We look 13, right? And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him a ram caught in the thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered him up for a burnt offering in the stead of his son. Did you catch it? Let's see if you caught it. And Abraham said, God will provide himself the lamb for a burnt offering. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him a ram. So it wasn't a lamb. So, was Abraham lying? No, he wasn't. This was a prophecy about Jesus. Even if he didn't know it, he was prophesying about Jesus. Okay? And if we actually look at the story, and you parallel these together, which is exactly what I'm going to do, Isaac is repeatedly called only begotten son, right? And that Hebrew word, right, has the same meaning as the Greek word used for Jesus in the New Testament, right? Now that's not the only thing. If we go, right, we see that Isaac, if I can find it, and Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it upon Isaac his son. So Isaac, the sacrifice, is carrying the wood. Let's go look at the parallel. John 19, verse 17. They took Jesus therefore, and he went out, bearing the cross for himself, unto the place called the place of a skull, which is called in Hebrew Golgotha, right? And that's where they crucified him. Now, look at the parallel. Isaac is the only begotten son who carried his own wood to the place where he would be sacrificed. Jesus is the only begotten son of the Father who carried his own cross to his sacrifice, right? Now, also, you can look this up. Tell me if I'm lying. Golgotha is the same region, is the same mountain range where Abraham was sacrificing his son in Mount Moriah. It's the same mountain range. This is actually completely false. They're not the same mountain range, but they're in like the same area where they would sacrifice. So you can see all these parallels, but let's look at even more. Alright, Genesis 22, verse 9. And they came to the place which God had told him of, and Abraham built the altar there, and laid the wood in order, and bound his son, and laid him on the altar upon the wood. So we can see that Isaac willingly went onto the wood, right? There's no text about him fighting back. There's no text about him yelling. There's no text about like, no, no. He willingly gets on this altar to be sacrificed, right? Now, let's look at the parallel. Let's look at John 10:17-18. Therefore doth the Father love me, because I lay down my life, that I may take it again. No one taketh it away from me, but I lay it down of myself. I have power to lay it down, and I have power to take it up again. This commandment received I from my Father. So we can see that Jesus is willingly laying his life down. At any time, he can take his life back up again if he wanted to, but he is willingly laying his life down. It's the same way that Isaac was willing to lay his life down. So if we actually look at these parallels, we can see that Isaac is the only begotten son of Abraham. Jesus is the only begotten son of the Father. Isaac carried his wood to the altar where he was going to be sacrificed. Jesus carries his own cross to where he's going to be crucified, sacrificed, right? And Abraham says that God will provide a lamb. But when we see where he actually looks up, he's seeing a ram. He's not looking at a lamb. This is again a prophecy about Jesus, because what is Jesus called all the time? The lamb that will be sacrificed. He's called that all over the Bible. Okay, so that's the lamb that was provided for the sacrifice. And again, they were even sacrificed in the same mountain range. And on top of that, Isaac willingly laid down on that altar. Jesus willingly gave up his life. I got a little brain farted there. So you can see the clear connection, right, on how Abraham knew that God was going to, or that God wouldn't actually make him sacrifice his son, or even if he did, that he would raise him from the dead. And then we see that this is actually a whole foreshadowing of the situation with Jesus, and it's pretty clear. So, yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. We are so close to 100 subscribers. Get us there. But, yeah, I'll see y'all. Love y'all. That's something to chew on.